Hello, Game SoundCon 2020, and welcome to Expanding the Composer's Toolkit. I'm Stephen Rader, and I like analyzing video game music. Every time I sit down and do a dedicated listen of a game soundtrack, I hear some musical gesture, something melodic, harmonic, rhythmic, or otherwise, that pushes against the boundaries of traditional music theory and creates something new. This is exciting, because when we as game composers come across new musical ideas, we have the opportunity to grow. We can analyze these musical gestures, assimilate them into our vocabularies, and put them into practice when we write music. I call this growth process expanding the composer's toolkit. Today I'll be sharing with you some transcriptions I've done of game music released within the last 10 years. I'll be focusing on the harmonic language within them and explaining my thought process behind why the harmony works, even when it falls outside traditional music theory. I hope you enjoy the pieces I present, but even more than that, my goal for this talk is to inspire you to analyze music on your own terms. I believe that the more we do this, the deeper pools of musical knowledge we'll have to draw from, and the more liberty we will have to write good music. Let's get started. This is Reach for the Summit from Lena Raine's score to the game Celeste. There's a lot of great stuff to talk about in this piece, but for today, let's focus on the chordal motion Lena is using here. Check this out. At first glance, the harmony doesn't sound too out of the ordinary, but check out this cadence. C major, D major, E major. It's a common enough cadence in modern media music, but what's unusual in this piece is how the nature of the E chord changes. In the intro, it's an E sus2 chord resolving to the next cadence on E minor. If we go back to the intro here, you'll see we start on these E sus2 chords. E, F sharp, B, but then every time we have that cadence, that C to D, we always end up on E minor. And that happens a second time. The piece is training us to perceive this piece in E minor. We go to the next phrase, yep, C, D, E minor. And then, this is so clever, when we cadence into the A section where the melody comes in, it sounds like it's going to be another one of these C, D, E sus2 chords, because we start off with that F sharp there, so C, D, E sus2, and we expect the suspended note to go up to the G, but when we finally get a G in this measure, it's a G sharp in the melody, giving us E major. How do we analyze this? We know that we're in E minor because of how it's been set up with the previous cadences, but how do we justify an E major chord in E minor? When I came across this, my first thought was the Picardy third, which is a term for cadencing to a major chord at the end of a minor piece. For example, if we were in E minor, we might do A minor, B minor, E major, which is a technique that was used at least as far back as the Renaissance era in order to make the final chord of a piece more restful and grounded. But it only works, the Picardy third only applies if the ending chord of a piece is major, not if it's a previous chord in the piece. And Lena's just getting started here. This E major cadence is the start of a loop that goes on for as long as the player is in the area. So we cadence to C, to D, to E major over and over and over. So I'm calling this progression in my mind the Picardy cadence, which I define as resolving a musical statement to the major one chord in a minor key without ending the piece. I think of it as sort of an expansion, of the Picardy third. Here's that harmonic motion one more time. See if you can feel the shift from expecting E minor to hearing E major. C major, D major, E major. Picardy cadence in the key of E minor. It's really effective at adding that rising energy to a cadence. This sort of major-minor ambiguity isn't actually that rare in game music these days. Check out this next piece from The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, composed by Manaka Karaoka. It plays during the deer hunting minigame that the player can find north of Hateno Village. See if you can hear whether the piece is in major or minor. Major or minor, right? Kinda depends on what bar and even what beat you're talking about. I notated the piece in C sharp minor, but it could have just as easily been C sharp major. I just don't like looking at key signatures with 7 sharps in them. Personally, I don't feel confident claiming that this piece is in major or minor. Either way I would try to analyze it, I wouldn't feel confident in my analysis. I'd much rather say that it's in both. I'm analyzing this piece under my term modal mixture, which I define as utilizing harmony from parallel major and minor modes interchangeably. In this case, C sharp major and C sharp minor. Modal mixture works best when the music returns to the one chord, the tonic chord, repeatedly to remind the audience what key it's in. Whenever we step away, we always immediately come back to the tonic in this piece. So we start off on C sharp, C sharp, C sharp. The major and the minor are sort of both the tonic in this case. But as soon as we hit that F sharp, which sort of definitively says C sharp major, because we have that A sharp, which isn't in C sharp minor, we immediately go, yep, it's a C sharp major chord. Yep, we're in C sharp major. And then as soon as we hit an A and a B chord, implying C sharp minor, because we have A naturals and B naturals in C sharp minor only, as soon as we hit those, we're immediately going back to another C sharp 5 chord, just to not stay away from the home key for too long. A major, B major, C sharp 5. Let me play the piece to you one more time and pay attention to the modal mixture between C sharp major and C sharp minor when we're in each mode. Major and minor, never at the same time, but used interchangeably. The second half of the piece uses modal mixture too, between A major and A minor, but I'm going to move on to the next tool in the toolkit now for the sake of time. If you want to spend more time in the piece though, feel free to download the transcription. All the transcriptions from today are available on my website, and I'll drop a link in the chat. Hopping from AAA titles back to indie games, let's talk about Undertale. Toby Fox did a great job with this game's score, and there's this one harmonic trick he uses over and over again that I'm really fond of. The clearest example of it is in the theme he wrote for the character Undine. Unlike the previous piece, the question here is less of major or minor, and more a question of major or minor what. Listen to Undine's theme and ask yourself, what key are we in? What key is that? Don't trust the key signature. I put it in 4 flats because that kept things relatively tidy. But look at, for example, those G naturals in bars 1 and 2 in the bass here, and contrast those to the G flats in bars 3 and 4. No key signature can account for that. It's almost like there are two key signatures and we're changing between the keys every 2 bars, except that each key is just a chord. And in fact, that's exactly how I'm thinking of the piece. I call this motion the tonal toggle. A piece is using the tonal toggle when there are 2 tonic chords, and the harmonic motion goes exclusively between the 2. In the previous piece we looked at, I mentioned that in order for modal mixture to work, the harmony has to frequently return to the tonic chord to remind the listener of what the tonal center is. With the tonal toggle, in my opinion, the rules are even more strict. The harmony can't leave the home chords at all, or the motion of the toggling back and forth is immediately lost. That's why tonal toggle works best with only 2 chords. It strikes a good balance between old and new. New home key every 2 bars, but the new home key is always something we've heard recently, so it's somewhat old at the same time. Let's listen through the end of Undyne's track here, and as we do, pay attention to how each chord sounds like the home chord while the music is there, as if we're redefining the tonic every 2 bars. I'll start playing from the melody here. While we're talking about tonic chords, let me introduce you to the next tool in the toolkit. The false tonic is a musical phrase that implies a tonality change and even cadences to the tonic chord of the new key, only to start the next phrase back on the original tonic chord. Check out how this piece starts in E minor, implies a D major harmony, even cadences to D as the false tonic, then whiplashes the harmony back to E minor, where it started. This piece is the main title track for an open-world survival game called Adalos, and I'm actually the composer. The game, Adalos, was unfortunately shut down before the development finished, so it's not available for playing, but I wanted to share this track with you as a way to demonstrate how composers like you and me can use these tools and our toolkits in our writing. In this case, I wanted to start the theme of the music on the tonic and end it on the tonic because I wanted the strength of the home chord to really bring us home and add that layer of like epic royalty. But with these chords taking up 2 to 4 bars at a time, that would mean remaining on an E minor chord for 6 bars, and it just sounded stagnant to my ear. For example, this D sus to D, which is our false tonic here, at the moment it cadences to E minor, and I really like the sound of that, but this E minor goes on for 4 bars of 12/8 time, and if all of this, 6 bars were E, that would just be, you know, a lot of E minor going around, and E5, E minor, and I didn't want the harmony to stagnate in that one. So I ended up having my cake and eating it too, so to speak, by just having 2 tonic chords, a real one and a false one. The reason this works so well in this case is that the piece isn't actually an E minor, it's an E Dorian, which means that it uses the same key signature as D major, but it centers around E minor as the home base. This is the reason for the C sharps that you're seeing in the melody, starting back at the beginning of our excerpt here. Boop. C sharp, because D sharp has 2 sharps, or excuse me, D major has 2 sharps in the key signature, F sharp and C sharp. E minor only has 1, it's F sharp, but we're seeing all these accidentals. Every time a C comes around, it's a C sharp. Later on, there's another C sharp. That's E with a C sharp in it, so E minor scale. With that C sharp makes it E Dorian, and that's the same key signature as D major. So when we cadence B flat to C to D, the D sounds natural as a tonic because the key signature implied D major the whole time. It's only when the phrase restarts that we hear that E motion. And that feels familiar because it's where we were at the beginning of the phrase. It feels like home, and yet it feels different compared to the D. So our brain has to do like a little reset each time we get back to that E minor. Let's listen to the excerpt again and ask yourself which feels like the tonic chord to you. E minor at the beginning of the phrase or D major at the end of the phrase. In my opinion, the cadence to D major feels good, but we heard E minor first, so when the D major chord is pulled out from under us, we feel that the home base was just a false tonic all along, and now on E minor we feel the real tonic. The next harmonic tool I want to share with you is more of a set of tools called chordioids. But first, let me clarify that I didn't create or name this tool. All the other tools I'm sharing today are completely subjective terms I came up with that you can take or leave at your leisure, but chordioids exist in modern music theory terminology. The problem is different people have different definitions of the word, so I just want to clarify, for the purposes of this talk, chordioid refers to chord fragments that imply harmony without committing to specific tonality. So chordioids are pitch collections that avoid easy analysis as major, minor, augmented, diminished, or otherwise. This is usually done by omitting the third of the chord and or voicing the chord in an unusual inversion. Let's look at Green Path from Hollow Knight. Listen to how the chordioids are built from chord fragments and how they sound as a result. Hear how open-ended everything sounds? It's all those chords labeled sus2 that aren't actually functioning as suspended chords. E sus2, B sus2. If we were to have an actual sus2 chord, the suspension would resolve. So here's E, F sharp, B. If this were an E sus2 chord, we would expect that that F sharp to resolve to a G, or to resolve to a G sharp for an E chord. And same for the B sus2, we would expect it to resolve to B minor or B major, but they don't. They don't resolve, they don't elide, they don't do anything that suspended chords typically do, which makes it start to feel like they're not suspended chords, but that they're more chordioids, I suppose is the only word for it. They're sus2 chords in that they have the same pitches, and that's the best way I knew how to analyze them for the sheet music, but they're chordioids in that they're functioning as incomplete chordal fragments. As the music progresses, the chords do occasionally get thirds in them, such as in measure 17, which was shortly before we cut off here. We have an A chord, but instead of just being an A sus2, it gets a C sharp in it. So we have sort of an A sus2 chord with the C sharp in it as well. But as I play it through, I'm going to play this section in a moment, listen to how the third of the chord, when it's supplied, is always in the melody. It's never in the harmony. It's always supplied by the melody as this lone, almost fragile voice, and it almost sounds like a color tone on top of the underlying steady harmony of the chordioid. Chordioids aren't the only harmonic gesture that's going on in green path, though. There's also this neat trick hidden in that harp ostinato that plinks away in the background of the entire piece, that F sharp, B, E, F sharp, B, E, F sharp, and how that ostinato interrelates with the underlying harmony. But in the interest of squeezing one more piece into this talk before wrapping things up, let me talk about the same harmonic tool in a different piece from a different composer. Listen to the way the chords and the ostinato interact in this last piece, which is Duty First from Call of Duty World War II. This was written by Wilbert Roget II. That's some thick harmony, right? Especially when you look at spots like measure 70, where the upper string line clashes with the lower brass. I mean, how do you justify that? That's an F natural on top of a D flat minor chord, except the D flat minor chord is inverted, so it's that F flat, the minor third of the D flat chord, that happens underneath all of that with the F, the high F on top. Goodness gracious, right? It sounds like a mistake when you play it out of context. But in the context, our musical sensibilities don't reject the F natural, because by the time measure 70 comes around, we've already been hearing that F for quite a while. It's in the lower octave at first, at measure 65, of course, but it's there every single eighth note, F, 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 and it's only when we get to measure 69 that it goes up the octave, but even then, there's still an F, and it lasts through the whole phrase until the cadence. So by the time we get to measure 70 and this F is clashing with the notes that are underneath, it's been repeated so many times that the ostinato doesn't need to fit into the harmony to feel justified. It just justifies itself by its own repetition. The only thing it needs is to keep going and say, no, this isn't a mistake, this is on purpose, and your ear buys it, hook, line, and sinker. In this, the high F is operating to my ear almost like a pedal tone. Pedal tones are a technique dating back from the Baroque era, when an organist would play and hold one of the pedal notes down in the bass register and play all sorts of dissonant chords on top of it, usually climaxing up to a cadence. The difference here, though, is that the F isn't in the bass, the F is on top. It's the other way around. The pedal tone, so to speak, is in the treble register up top, while all of the lower harmony shifts around it. F minor, G flat major 7 sus, G7 flat 5, and so forth. As a result, I call this the inverted pedal tone, which I define as a high sustained pitch or ostinato that is justified over dissonant harmony due to its repetition. I'm going to play the same excerpt again, and this time see if you can hear the high F in the strings acting as an inverted pedal tone as the chords shift underneath it. To my ear, the ostinato gives the music a persistent feel, like it's saying, I'm going to stand my ground no matter what sort of harmonic dissonance comes my way. Very fitting for a Call of Duty title. I want to make sure that I leave some time for your questions, so I'm going to stop my analyses now. However, I want to reiterate that all the piano reductions I showed you today, including a few extra pieces that I didn't have time to squeeze in, are up on my website. If you ever need a reminder of what Modal Mixture or Tonal Toggle looks like, or if you'd just like to do some analysis of your own, please don't be shy about grabbing them from my site. In any case, I hope I've been able to pull back the curtain a bit and demonstrate how we can analyze and understand modern game music on our own terms, even when it doesn't mesh with traditional music theory. The better tools we have in our kits, the better music we can make, and I look forward to hearing what all of us are able to write in the years to come. Thank you.